Hi, I'm Dr. Lenne Hunt with the Marriage Recovery Center, and today we're talking about one of the issues which are core to emotional abuse. If you've done much reading, much listening to videos, then I'm sure you're familiar with the term gaslighting. Gaslighting refers to a general idea that one party in the relationship is attempting to distort the other person's sense of reality. Gaslighting is actually accomplished through a set of other tactics. Each of these, in the end, help create this reality distortion. For example, outright denial. So one person says to another, when you said this, when you did that thing, it had this effect on me. I felt hurt, I felt embarrassed, I felt whatever. And the abuser's response is, I never said that. That didn't happen. You're remembering that wrong. Another tactic would be blame shifting, where there's not denial that the event occurred, but rather the abuser's portrayal is that it occurred because of something the victimized person did. So yes, I did this, but it was because you caused it in some way, shape, or form. So there are all of these tactics, each of them a bit different, but the result of them is to create this shift, this distortion in reality. It's an incredibly hurtful result. And unfortunately, part of the way emotional abuse works is that, especially in the beginning and middle, like before the victim gains awareness that that's what's going on, the victim often accepts the responsibility that's being given to them. They accept it and then consequently feel the burden to fix it in themselves, to fix it in the environment that they've been told that they've created. And so now the problem is no longer the abusive one. The problem is now the victims. And they work really hard at fixing it. If you've been in this kind of relationship, you know what that feels like, the working hard part. You know, most of the families that come to me, the wounded party comes saying, I've read all these books, I've listened to all these videos, I've done all this journaling. You know, I could have a graduate degree in this by now. And there's truthfulness to that. They have believed at whatever level that they're the problem, that this is because of them somehow, some way. And they have worked incredibly hard to fix themselves, to fix the dynamics of the relationship, even to help the other person. They've taken on the responsibility of that too. So even if they've begun to kind of suspect that the problem at least isn't always them, they still take on the responsibility to try to fix the other person, which means that the responsibility is still on them. Incredibly hurtful again. And so not only am I wounded from the gaslighting and all of its various and sundry tactics, all the ways that it shows up, not only am I wounded from that, but now I'm exhausted from all the hard work I've put in. I'm just emotionally exhausted. And in addition to that, I feel guilty and responsible for my own part in this, or at least the part I've been told is mine. And that is the weightiness of emotional abuse. It cuts across every piece of us. What we think, what we believe, the values we hold, the feelings that we have, they all get twisted into some odd, illogical, unreasonable version of reality that somehow we come into agreement with. Now, this disordered responsibility taking on the part of the abusive one, there can be a lot of ways that people come to that kind of trait. So not one path. Perhaps they were raised in a home that modeled that. Perhaps it's part of a larger personality disorder, some of which might be biologically or genetically transmitted. Maybe this is connected to a lack of skills like empathy, for example, where the emphasis is on protecting themselves at the expense of what their victim feels. There's no reaching forward into the victim's experience and no concern about the effect you're having on them. Lots of ways to get to this place. And if we're talking about how to treat the abuser, how to treat this responsibility disorder, then what led them there matters. It may affect what the treatment looks like, what the course of the treatment is. But if our concern is on the victim and how to heal their heart, then the truth is it doesn't matter how the abusive person got there. Whatever their path was, the effect is still the same. The effect of a hurt heart, the effect of false responsibility. What you find is that victims in this sort of relationship dynamic often feel a sense of shame and belittlement of self, first from the mouth of the abuser, but they often come into agreement with that. I'm really not as smart. I'm not as competent. I'm really not a good communicator. I'm just too sensitive. They begin to take on the distorted reality that they've been handed, and it compromises their view of themselves. And now we've got injury on top of injury on top of injury. The only way through any of that is to get hold of the responsibility disordered individual and to begin to provide correction for that. Now, I do want to say this piece connected to that. One of the tactics that is often used in an emotionally abusive relationship is for the abuser to, in some conscious, intentional way, try to trigger their victim into being out of control. So angry, so hurt, so full of the sense of injustice of it all, that they lose control of their emotional self. They've taken it and taken it and taken it, and they can't take it anymore, and it erupts out of the victim now. It erupts out of the victim, while the abuser remains in control. So in this conversation, they've triggered the other one into looking hysterical, into looking dramatic, into looking out of control in their anger, while they remain calm, cool, collected. And again, it creates this illusion that you're the problem. If you weren't so out of control, we wouldn't be having this problem. The reverse can also happen, that they intentionally, at some level, trigger the other person who, rather than overreact, fades away. They withdraw from the relationship, shut it down entirely. Now, that's not always a bad thing to do. We certainly do recommend that kind of separation, the removing of yourself from a really toxic dynamic, a really toxic conversation. But part of what that creates on the part of the abuser then is the ability to say, well, the problem in our relationship is that you just shut down, you just abandoned. You're the one who walked away. And so again, whether there's this self-protective kind of withdrawing, or whether it's, I didn't withdraw soon enough and now I'm so charged that I'm behaving in this kind of heightened way, you still come off looking like the one who's responsible. So I want to give this caution. If you're the person who's in an emotionally abusive relationship and you're in the receiving end of this, if you're the one being victimized, if you sense that you are on the edge of being pushed too far, if your sense of yourself is that your emotions are so churned up and are getting so and so heightened that you may lose control of your own reactions, I really do want to urge you to think through how to get some space and how to get the emotions back under control, because you don't want to give them that ammunition of being able to say, well, you lost it too. So what's the difference in you losing it and me losing it? It's all the same. Unfortunately, one of the consequences of living in this kind of relationship for very long at all is that we, the victims, begin to be a less glorious version of ourselves. We begin to lose us in some ways and begin to act in ways that are contrary to our own integrity. And that becomes another source of injury to our souls. Again, it all stems from the abusive person not wanting to take responsibility. But out of that flows a host of really negative effects that create substantial wounds. And so in the end, we're looking at a core wound in the disordered person that needs to be addressed so that they can appropriately take responsibility, but also the cleanup for the heart of the victimized person. The good news is that this is treatable. It is treatable for the abusive one. It is treatable for the victimized one. But it doesn't go away on its own. And it would be rare for the abusive party to just sort of suddenly, out of nowhere, or in reaction to something the victim has said, just kind of see the light on their own. It tends to take more intervention than that. And so along those lines, the other thing I want to say to you is that if this describes your life right now, if it describes your relationship, whether you are the injured party or the offending party, we would love to help. We would love to come alongside you and help you figure this out. I promise you that it can be different if you want it to be. At the very least, if you are the injured party, even if the other person never comes into responsibility taking, there is still healing for your soul. And again, we would be glad to walk with you through that. So you're going to see a number appear below here on the screen. That's the number to our client care team, a great group of people who would be happy to hear some of your story and help you schedule whatever would be the next best step for you in coming through this. We hope to hear from you soon.